This computer. Well, welcome to the Valley Hoops Insider podcast, part of the Valley Hoops Insider website. I'm Schroeder. That good-looking man on the screen is not me. That's Dick Luedke. He is the play-by-play broadcaster of the Illinois State Redbirds, and we're going to talk Arch Madness. We're going to talk about the Redbirds. We're going to talk a little bit about him. He's getting ready to hang up the headset, as we say. And so, Dick, we're going to talk about that. We'll push that to a little bit later. But first, appreciate you taking time with me on what I call Holy Week as we prepare for Arch Madness.
Yeah, it is a wonderful week. The tournament is so well administrated. Coaches I've worked with who've been part of the Big Ten tournament and the ACC tournament and the Big 12 tournament have said that this tournament is as well run as any in the country.
Yeah, I think it's spectacular. The play is good. The environment's outstanding. It's like a big family reunion. That's what I tell everybody every year. It's like a big family reunion. All the Valley family members come together in downtown St. Louis. We're going to talk. You're getting ready to retire as the broadcaster for the Redbirds, and we'll talk about that in a minute. First, I want to talk a little Valley Hoops. Today, they announced Antonio Reeves is on the second team all-conference team. Do you think that's about the right spot for him?
Well, I would guess he was close to making the first team. I don't know if he's the highest vote getter among the second teamers or not. But I understand the five guys who were picked on for the first team. They're all wonderful players. They tend to be players. Well, they all are players for teams that have been more successful in the Valley this year. So I'm sure it's disappointing to Antonio and to the coaching staff at Illinois State and to his teammates, but I don't think they're shocked by it.
Leading scorer in the league, a little over 20 points a game. He was spectacular. And jumping up from about 12 points a game a year ago. I mean, just an outstanding season. The Redbirds are on a winning streak. They've won one in a row. The first win after 4 or 5 losses after Dan Muller was let go. Just your sense of how the team is feeling about itself heading into Arch Madness.
Well, I think that victory over Indiana State was significant regarding their confidence. You mentioned it's now a 1-game winning streak, but in the context of a 5-game losing streak, which is what happened before that, and I believe it was 10 of 11 games lost, that is significant. And so I think that's a good thing. The bad thing is that because they beat the Sycamores by 20 points, will they have the respect that they need to have for their first round opponent in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament? They had gone through a very similar thing in a 2-game series with Evansville, beat the Purple Aces by, I think it was 28 points or something like that. And then 2 days later lost to them in Evansville. So hopefully they learn from that experience and will not take the Sycamores lightly, even though they handled them pretty well in their recent outing.
Got to stay sharp for that Thursday night appearance. Dan Muller let go 7 games ago, something like that. How, on the level of 1 to 10, how surprised were you that Dan was let go at that time? I think a number of people thought perhaps, his job was in jeopardy. The team wasn't going great. But to have it happen when it did, I think surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess I'd rate my surprise that it happened then maybe at about 8 or 9. I wasn't surprised that it happened, but the timing was, as I understand it, a function of the contract that Dan and Illinois State had signed. He needed the notice, and so that's why it happened. But it was surprising. It was awkward, I think. I mean, at first Dan thought maybe he'd finish out the season. Then he realized that maybe that's not the best way to do this. And so it was all tough to handle, I think, for everybody connected to the program, including me. I was sorry to see it happen, but again, not shocked that it did happen eventually.
I, like you, I'm a big Dan Muller fan. And so like you, not shocked that it happened, very surprised the way it happened, and sad that it happened. I've got all those things going on in my brain. Let's turn the page a bit, because I know you're close to Dan, and so I don't want to drug that up, and I am too. I don't want to mess with that too much. But Brian Jones has impressed me the couple of times I've talked to him. Tell people watching this, give us a little Brian Jones analysis.
Well, he's experienced as a head coach. He was the head man at North Dakota for 13 seasons, had some good success there, took one of those teams to the NCAA tournament. And he's a great guy to work with. I mean, I've enjoyed getting to know him since he became an assistant at Illinois State. And now I'm getting to know him even better because we do a lot of interviews. He's a good guy to talk to, and I think very knowledgeable, especially on the offensive end of the floor. I mean, that's where Dan has used his specialty is in he's sort of been the Redbirds offensive coordinator. And I like what he's done with the team thus far. I mean, he hasn't changed things drastically, but I think the motivation is still there for these guys, has been since Dan was released as the head coach. And I think Brian's part of the reason for that.
The Redbirds were 10-9 and playing in a game when Cy Chapman got hurt. And after he went down, the wheels just fell off and the team never really recovered. That was a turning point in the season, I have to believe. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And that happened at the very end of that loss at Evansville, after they had just trounced the Purple Aces at Redbird Arena. And that did change the season drastically. I think certainly more than I thought it would. I mean, I know Cy Chapman is a great player, but I didn't know that his absence would affect the Redbirds as drastically as it did. They really had trouble adjusting, I think, to just learning how to play without their top player, their top inside player. And they've gotten a little better at that, but it's still tough. He was a big loss.
I thought he was a warrior inside and gave them a confidence by the way he played. And so when he went down, obviously they lost a lot of that, and the team has really struggled since then. The Redbirds and Indiana State play Thursday night, the first game of the tournament, and kicking off. Nobody wants to play on Thursday night at Arch Madness. They don't want to be there because they earned their way there. They didn't want to earn that. And then secondly, if they have any success, it's very usually short-lived. But your experiences here at Arch Madness, can you, you love the basketball, you love the Redbirds, you love calling games. Besides those three things, and you mentioned the Valley runs the tournament very well, what are some of the highlights of being in St. Louis for Arch Madness?
Well, I love the city. I love going to various restaurants in the city. I'm an addicted runner, and so when I have time, I go up to Forest Park. I love running there. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. But as far as being at the tournament is concerned, it's so much fun to see other guys who do what I do, other play-by-play announcers. I mean, there are several of them who've been in the Valley forever, just like me, and we have a good time seeing one another and expanding our friendship with one another. It's great.
I don't spend a ton of time listening to broadcasters outside of the Missouri Valley Conference because I'm so focused on the Valley. But I'm so powerfully impressed by you and some of those other guys you mentioned, guys that have been there 30, 40 years. Just the quality of the play-by-play radio broadcasters in the Valley is just, to me, off the charts.
I agree. And I have listened, not as much as I do to the other Valley guys, to Mike Reese and Dave Snell and Gary Rima and others in the Valley. Art Haynes is outstanding, I think. And I've listened to it, especially in the Big Ten. I listen to those guys, and I know a few of them, and they're very strong as well. But I think the overall quality of radio broadcasting in the Valley is as strong as it is anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's spectacular. You are fixing to retire. Tell us a little bit about what went into that. I mean, you're still a young, spry guy. You run all over Forest Park, and yet you're going to retire. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I don't know how you define young, but if you ask me for my age, it won't sound that young. I mean, it just seems like it's time. The biggest motivation for me is to spend more time with members of my family. I have a couple of daughters, each of whom have a couple of grandchildren, and each of whom have wonderful husbands, and each of whom is out of town.
Ah.
And so, I don't have the chance as much as I'd like to get out of town and see them and visit with their husbands and get to spend a little more time with our 4 grandkids. So that's the primary reason.
You didn't want to go on the farewell tour like Gary Rima, live somewhere else for a while and fly in and out like he's been doing. I mean,
Yeah.
he hasn't exactly had the nose to the grindstone this year.
He's told me about that. And yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, but no, I'm doing it a little differently.
So, and I know you've been an insurance salesman for a long time. Are you also pulling back from that, or will you continue to do that work?
No, actually, I worked at State Farm Corporate as really a public spokesperson
Oh,
for
okay.
that company, but I retired from that in about almost 7 years ago now.
Wow. See, I thought you were still pounding the pavement for State Farm.
Nope. No, I left there in 2015 and have been solely working as the radio voice of the Redbirds since then. So, I've been kind of semi-retired since 2015. This isn't like a full-time job, but now I'm going to go all the way.
So Dick Luedke is now on a fixed income. You can send your checks too. No, just kidding. The I wanted to have you on because we talk almost every year about this time. Sometime down at Arch Madness, you and I'll connect, and sometimes it ends up on our website like this, and sometimes not. And I just have so appreciated Dick, the way you do games. I'm an aficionado of broadcasters. Like I've done enough play-by-play stuff myself that I just I'm discriminating, and I'm sure you are too. But because of what you do, you listen for things, and just always been so impressed by both your accuracy, your ability to build a moment, your ability to tell a story, your ability to be entertaining and yet have it not be about you. I think there's an art form to play-by-play broadcasting, particularly on the radio. And tell us a little bit about that, what you're hoping to achieve when the game is going on.
Well, I want to paint the picture that those who are listening to us can't see. And there are fewer who can't see the game now, of course. They're
True.
all available visually. But still, I just love giving as much detail as I can and allowing the people who are listening to me to envisage what's going on. And that's what I learned from the play-by-play guys I listened to when I was a little kid. There's the guy at the University of Minnesota who was their radio football and basketball play-by-play man for about as long as I've been at Illinois State. His name is Ray Christensen. And I just loved his work, and I learned a lot from listening to him. And then I got to know him when I was a student at the University of Minnesota, and he was still doing the games. And he was an inspiration for me. And I'd like to think that I've done a job similar to the one that he did for so many years for the Gophers.
It is odd. You mentioned television, without saying it. There's all the games are on TV now, and radio is in like newspaper is kind of in a little bit of a difficult spot. And so I do think there is that temptation, right, for radio people to maybe try to have to embellish more than they would normally have, because somehow there's this whole other medium that's stealing the ears, at least, of the people we're hoping to reach.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. And I mean, I suppose that's one of the reasons why I'm departing. We just don't quite have the percentage of listenership that we used to have, but I know a lot of people still do listen and will continue to listen. Some people try to match up the radio description from their favorite guy. I'm sure that happens at Southern Illinois and Bradley and Missouri State and Northern Iowa and elsewhere as well. With the television broadcast of the game, so they can hear their favorite radio guy and still watch the game. And I think a fair number of people are doing that. So it's not as though this profession is evaporating totally, but it's not quite what it used to be.
And I think the radio play-by-play guy that travels with the team and does the games is a very unique person. Maybe there might be more than one person on that broadcast team, but they're very unique people with the program. They're kind of a conduit for the team to the fans and back to the team as well. whereas those TV guys kind of come in and come out a lot. And I think your role there at Illinois State, and you mentioned the others that, assigned to teams, I think it's such a valuable role and such an important one. And I think fans gravitate to a guy like yourself rather than just Fred, who happens to be the ESPN Plus broadcaster of the night. They actually feel like they can really trust you, and you're part of the team.
Well, the coaches we work with maybe get to know us a little better than they do the TV guys, because as you said, they're with us constantly. They do interviews with us before the game, after the game. All of us, I think, have coaches shows that happen once a week. And so we spend almost an hour with the coach. We also spend a little time with one of their players. So they have to spend a lot of time dealing with us, and they get to know us. And yeah, it's great to develop the relationships with the coaches.
I was blown away the day after Dan Muller was let go that he came to his coach's show.
Yes.
And I watched the whole thing. Probably later on YouTube or something. I know I didn't watch it live, but I watched the whole thing. And I thought the two of you, and Joe, right, was the other guy on the show?
Mike.
And
Yep.
I thought you guys handled that thing so brilliantly, with great class and humility. And what was that like for you? That had to be just such a different set of circumstances.
I've done a lot of coaches shows with a lot of coaches, but that's the one I'll remember more than any other because of the circumstances, but also because of the graciousness that Dan showed under that circumstance. I wondered if he was going to show up for the show, because he had determined just before we went on the air for that show that he was not going to finish out the season. He thought that was best for himself and for the program. And I thought, well, maybe he won't come, but he did. And he was so gracious, and it was a lot of fun. He actually spent some time being the interviewer on that show.
Yeah,
he was asking me questions about my time as the play-by-play voice of the Redbirds. It's so memorable. It was wonderful.
He flipped it around on you. I remember that. And I thought, this is perfect, because I want to hear the things he was asking you, and I thought that was amazing. And I think it spoke a lot to your guys' relationship. I've spoken to him about you before, and he just gushes about the way you support the program and the team and himself, and the way you do it. And so I thought that program just really illustrated that all over again, things that he had told me, privately, individually, not like it was a secret, but individually telling me that before. We were talking about the radio guys, over in the Ohio Valley Conference, which I also cover fairly significantly, on their ESPN Plus broadcast, most of them use their radio feed into that game. And I think ESPN doesn't like that, or maybe the Valley doesn't like that. The Valley's not going to let like Murray State and Belmont do that next year. And probably because of different commercial reads and all those kinds of things. There's probably financial reasons for that. But to me, that's the best of both worlds. I turn on that Murray State game and I've got Neil doing the broadcast, and I'm like, whoa, this is perfect. I'm getting to watch it, but I'm getting to hear that Murray State perspective. And I think that would be the best of all worlds.
Well, I also just love listening to radio play-by-play, and because you're a radio play-by-play guy, you do as well. But it does make sense to me. I mean, I've done a little bit of TV. I did the state tournament in Illinois for a few years, and what's challenging when a radio guy is doing that is that you tend to say a little too much. You tend to insult the viewer a little too much, because you're painting the picture of what he can already see.
Done it on the t-shirt. Yes.
Yeah. And so you have to know what not to say. And I don't know what not to say when I'm doing a television broadcast. And so that's why I've done very little of that over the years. I love radio, being a radio play-by-play guy so much more than I would being a TV play-by-play guy.
Dick, I like to think of myself as a humble guy. We all want to think we're humble, right? And I was telling somebody that, I said, I like radio better. And I was giving them all those reasons. And the guy said to me, you really like it better because you're the star on TV. The other guy is the star. And I went, wait a minute, that's probably true. I was
Well,
rebuked, you know.
all of us who are in this business have an ego for sure. We wouldn't be here if we
That's
didn't.
true.
And so
That's true.
that's an interesting point that you make.
So I think it might have been, you might have done an interview with Mike Reese that I listened to, and or it was somebody, but I think it was Mike Reese. And you were talking about some of your fondest memories go back more to football. And you've told me that before about a playoff game and those kinds of things. When you think about Redbird basketball, are there two or three maybe seasons or events or games or even coaches that really stand out to you?
Well, the two Redbird games that I think of most, the first one is the last time the Redbirds won an NCAA tournament game, which has been a long time ago, 1998. A guy named Dan Muller was a senior player on that team. He scored the winning basket at the buzzer against Tennessee. Just a dramatic, played out in Sacramento, California. Just a dramatic moment that I'll never forget. The other one was the year before the Missouri Valley tournament moved to St. Louis. Before that time, teams in the Valley would host the tournament themselves, and they would take turns. And that only lasted for about 5 years or so. Before that, each game was played at a different place, depending upon who was the highest seed. But in 1990, the Redbirds hosted the tournament. It was the first full season for Redbird Arena. And the Birds, who I think were seeded fourth or just third that year, did make it to the championship game, in part because they were playing on their home court. But they played Southern Illinois in the championship game in 1990. And it was, I still remember the score, 81-78. Redbirds won it. But just a highly competitive, dramatic game. And Redbird Arena has never been as electric. It's been very electric in several games, but not to that degree since then. It was just an incredible game to broadcast.
I was up at Redbird Arena the year 2017, I guess it was, when the Redbirds lost the championship to Wichita State, and they go to the NIT, and then you're playing in the quarterfinals or something of the NIT. If they win, they're probably going to play Illinois the next game. Right. And maybe at Redbird Arena, the place was pretty electric that night.
Oh, it was Central Florida. Yeah. And it was actually round of 16 in the NIT. And they led most of the game, but made a couple of mistakes at the end and lost it. Had they won it, it would have been the U of I at Redbird Arena for a quarterfinal round game, with the winner of which would go to the NIT Final Four at Madison Square Garden. So that loss, among the most disappointing losses ever for me, would be that one. I'm sure that's the case for Dan Muller as well.
Yeah, I remember I wanted to go up there, and I remember the fans all had their like flashlights out or their phones out, and all of that was going on. And you had Mikhail McIntosh on that team, and a number of really outstanding players, Paris Lee and others. And yeah, they were ready, right? I mean, they were just poised to do great things, and 17-1 in the conference, and it was just such a great team. And then maybe even equally disappointing is that we thought a couple of those guys were going to come back, and they said, oh no, we're going to turn pro. And then instead they transferred, and that's heartbreaking, isn't it? To it with college fans and I even think people like a play-by-play guy that's associated with the team, you know, kids get to make the decisions they want to make, but you're kind of disappointed. It's like, wait a minute, we're a team, aren't we? You know, and so there is that disappointment.
Yeah, Mikhail McIntosh, one of those who left, and he was an extremely talented player, and that was tough. And since then, I mean, 17-18 season wasn't bad, but after that season, the Redbirds since then have not been able to avoid Thursday night at the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. This will be the fourth year in a row that they've had to play in the preliminary play-in round.
Before I let you go, we are starting Arch Madness this Thursday. You've seen all the teams, obviously, twice, and watched them progress through the year. Tell me a team or two you think. I mean, obviously, we can look at the standings and tell who 3 or 4 of the best teams are. But who do you expect to win on Sunday? Who do you think's cutting down the nets?
Well, if I had to pick one team, I guess maybe I'd go with Loyola Chicago. I think they're tremendously talented. Northern Iowa obviously beat them and won the regular season title. A great overtime game at home. Boy, that was a dramatic finish to the season. Ben Jacobson is a wonderful coach. This year's Northern Iowa team is fascinating because their defense, their opponents have shot the ball very well, high percentages from 3 and from 2. But the Panthers are so good in other areas of the game. They're the number 2 defensive rebounding team in the country, and they take great care of the ball and they force a decent number of turnovers. It's fascinating to me how Northern Iowa gets it done against teams that appear to have more talent on the floor than they do. Missouri State, is a great team as well, and Drake. It's going to be a fascinating tournament, I think. Any of those 4 could definitely win it. And even, it just seems to me as though there isn't as much distance between the top of the league and the bottom of the league this year as there usually is. And so maybe somebody will come up with a shocking championship. It happens every once in a while. It hasn't happened for a long time in the Valley. It has happened in other leagues. But who knows? Maybe a team like Illinois State will shock some folks.
So give us a little scouting report. Illinois State versus Indiana State. How do you expect that game? What are some of the key factors to that game? I told you before we got on, I'm announcing that game for local radio here. So you're doing my pregame prep right now.
Well, yeah. And I think one of the keys is, will Illinois State enter that game with the right mental framework, realizing that it's not going to be as easy as it was for them at Redbird Arena in the game this past Saturday? One problem they've had against the Sycamores is defending without fouling. In both of the games that they've played against Indiana State, the one they won and the one they lost, they put Indiana State at the line way too many times. So I think they have to do a little better in that area. If they do those 2 things, I think they've got a pretty good shot.
Should be an interesting weekend here in St. Louis. Dick Luedke is one of the best folks. He's one of the best people, one of the best broadcasters out there. And we appreciate your time today. Just being a part of this. Wanted to connect with you before you got here because I know it's going to be busy for you all weekend long.
I hope it's a long weekend for the Redbirds, but we'll see. Harry, it's always wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much.
That's our friend Dick Luedke. Thanks for watching and listening. You've been watching and listening the Valley Hoops Insider podcast, part of valleyhoopsinsider.com. Remember, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.